Does God approve of interracial marriage? Should interracial marriages be avoided by Christians? Studies have shown that interracial marriages have a higher rate of divorce than same-race marriages. Does this mean Christians should avoid the formation of these kinds of relationships? I believe we can find the answers if we look deeper into the issues. Let's look at the history of interracial marriages in the United States of America. There was a time back before 1967, starting even in the 1800s, that interracial marriage was banned in many states, specifically the southern states and between the blacks and the whites. It was during this time that we find the quotes from Ellen White about interracial marriage. Now, as I have talked to people about this topic, many people have brought up, oh, you know Ellen White speaks about it. And I was like, yeah, and they say she spoke a lot about interracial marriage. I'm like, really? She spoke a lot? All right. So I started studying. I only found 2 quotes from Ellen White about interracial marriage. And they were in the context of marriages between blacks and whites, which was considered a taboo back in her time. If you look here, in 1952, a Gallup poll was taken that showed that only 4% of Americans supported interracial marriage. So that was in 1952, but back in the 1800s, there was definitely a taboo against it in most of the country. Here's one of the quotes that Ellen White said. "But there is an objection to the marriage of the white race with the black. All should consider that they have no right to entail upon their offspring that which will place them at a disadvantage. They have no right to give them as a birthright a condition which would subject them to a life of humiliation. The children of these mixed marriages have a feeling of bitterness toward the parents who have given them this lifelong inheritance. For this reason, if there were no other, there should be no intermarriage between the white and colored race." So that's pretty straightforward, right? She's saying between the white and the black race, there should be no intermarriage, specifically because of the feelings of bitterness that it will cause in the children. Now, we're looking at this from the standpoint of the way the culture looked at it back in the 1800s. It was a taboo. The culture looked at it as unmoral and not acceptable. Here's the second quote. "In reply to the inquiries regarding the advisability of intermarriage between Christian young people of the white and black races, I will say that in my earlier experience, this question was brought before me. And the light given me of the Lord was that this step should not be taken, for it is sure to create controversy and confusion. I have always had the same counsel to give. No encouragement to marriages of this character should be given among our people. Let the colored brother enter into marriage with the colored sister who is worthy, one who loves God and keeps his commandments. Let the white sister who contemplates uniting in marriage with the colored brother refuse to take this step, for the Lord is not leading in this direction. Time is too precious to be lost in controversy that will arise over this matter. Let not questions of this kind be permitted to call our ministers from their work. The taking of such a step will create confusion and hindrance. It will not be for the advancement of the work or for the glory of God." So here's the second reason that I saw that she, and this is the only other quote I found, of what she was saying about interracial marriage between blacks and whites. And she's saying that it's going to cause controversy. Time is too precious to be lost in controversy that will arise from this problem of interracial marriage between blacks and whites. Now, so we look at these in the context of that time. It makes a lot of sense what she said. And it seems that this should also apply to today. But there's been a debate over, does it apply today? Can blacks and whites intermarry? Does God approve of it? Or even other races? What about whites and Hispanics, or Hispanics and Asians, or whatever the racial differences are? Does God approve of that? Let's look at the current situation here in the United States. Ever since 1967, interracial marriage has been fully legal in the United States, in every single state in the United States. Ever since that time, there's documented proof that interracial marriage has been rising ever since. Now, the census in 2010 found that currently here in the United States, and this was in 2010, 4 years ago, that there were 9 million multiracial Americans, making up 2.9% of the population. So it's been growing. Back in the 1960s, there wasn't even 1 million, and now we are up to 9 million multiracial Americans. Now let's look at the stats here. I'm going to show you a graph here. This was in 1959. So this is when 4% of Americans said that they approved of interracial marriage. Now, if you look up here, you have 87% in 2013. This was a Gallup poll taken. 87% approves of marriage between blacks and whites. Now, this is the way it was worded in 1958. Marriages between the white and colored people, all right? And here it was said marriages between the whites and non-whites. So as it got closer, closer to our day, they started using between whites and non-whites. So this is also reflective not just of people's view of black and white relationships, but all the other races as well. Here is some more statistics. They found in this Gallup poll that it was the younger generation, the 18 to 29-year-olds, who had the largest percentage of approval of interracial marriage. That is where we have the largest percentage. And the other percentages are still quite high, but as you can see, 65 years or older is 70%, which we're going to talk a little bit, why is that and what plays into that. And then also you see the East, Midwest, South, and West. And the West has the most interracial marriage of all the states. Mostly because it's become sort of a melting pot. There's been cultures from all over who have come to the West. Now, what are the underlying issues for interracial marriage? As I was studying this topic, as Alan mentioned, I've been interested in this. I've had a lot of questions about this ever since I was young. And I remember asking my parents, what does God think about, blacks and whites marrying? Or what does God think about this? And at first I thought it was just a matter of whether, my skin's white, the other person's skin is black, or whatever that may be, whatever the skin is. I thought it was just a matter of the outward appearance. But I've realized that it's not just interracial marriage and between the races that is the big thing. The underlying issues are what are up here. We have, first underlying issue is the culture. Now, I was able to interview one of our staff members who is involved in interracial marriage. And by going through that interview, she pointed out a few main points that I actually have up here on the board. And these here are some of the points she pointed out, as well as some others from research. First, language. In interracial marriages, the language plays a very vital and important part within the marriage. If you have a Asian who doesn't hardly speak any English, and then you have an American who doesn't speak any, let's say the Asian's Japanese, doesn't speak any Japanese, then you're going to have some conflicts, and that marriage is not as likely to last as another marriage. Since the showing that interracial marriages have a greater percentage of divorce. Like I mentioned before,